The October wind cut through Asheville with that peculiar sharpness that comes just before the leaves give up their color entirely. I'd driven myself to Dr. Hammond's office that Tuesday morning, the same way I'd been driving myself everywhere for the past 47 years since I got my license at 20. My daughter, Celestine, thought I shouldn't be driving anymore. She'd made that clear during our last phone call, her voice tight with what she called concern, but felt more like condescension. The appointment had been routine, blood pressure slightly elevated, but nothing alarming for a woman of 67. Dr. Hammond had smiled and told me I was doing remarkably well, that my cognitive tests showed no decline, that I should keep doing exactly what I was doing. I'd felt vindicated driving home, mentally composing the conversation I'd have with Celestine, where I'd gently but firmly tell her to back off. My house sat on Montfort Avenue, a modest craftsman bungalow I'd bought 32 years ago after my husband, Roland, died suddenly of a heart attack. I'd raised Celestine there alone, working double shifts at the textile mill until it closed, then retraining as a medical billing specialist. Every mortgage payment had been made on time. Every repair had been handled. The garden still bloomed because I made it bloom. The envelope was wedged in my screen door, thick and official-looking. I remember thinking it was strange that the mail carrier had put it there instead of in the mailbox. My hands trembled slightly as I opened it, still holding my purse and keys, the afternoon sun creating long shadows across my porch. The words swam before my eyes at first. Petition for guardianship. Incapacitated person. Celeste Wilhelmina Pritchard, hereinafter referred to as the respondent. That was me. I was the respondent. My daughter, Celestine Maeve Pritchard, was listed as the petitioner. I stood there for what must have been 10 minutes, reading and rereading the document. According to the papers, I was mentally unfit to manage my own affairs. The evidence cited was alarming. I'd been seen wandering the neighborhood confused. I'd forgotten to pay bills resulting in service disruptions. I'd given money to suspicious strangers. I'd had multiple car accidents. None of it was true. Not a single word. The papers said a hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks from that day. 2 weeks to defend my entire life, my competence, my right to exist as an autonomous human being. I thought about the conversation I'd had with Mrs. Kowalski next door just last week. She'd asked if Celestine was visiting soon, and I'd mentioned we weren't speaking much lately. Mrs. Kowalski had gotten that uncomfortable look people get when families aren't picture-perfect, had changed the subject quickly. I walked inside my house, the house I'd maintained alone for over 3 decades, and set my purse down on the hall table exactly where it always went. Everything was in its place. The bills were organized in their folder, all paid and filed. The calendar on the wall showed my appointments, my volunteer schedule at the library, my book club meetings. My life was ordered, purposeful, independent. I called Celestine. The phone rang 4 times before she answered, her voice bright and false. "Mom, how was your doctor's appointment?" I closed my eyes. "You know I had a doctor's appointment today." A pause. "Well, yes, I'd asked you about it last week, remember?" "I remember everything, Celestine, including finding guardianship papers on my door this afternoon." The silence on the other end was different now, heavier. When she spoke again, the brightness was gone. "Mom, this is for your own good. People have been calling me, worried about you. Mrs. Kowalski saw you wandering around looking lost. Your electricity was shut off last month. You're not yourself anymore." "My electricity was never shut off," I said, my voice steady though my heart was hammering. "Not once in 32 years. And the only time I've been wandering was when I was looking for Mrs. Kowalski's cat that got out. She asked for my help. That's not how she tells it. Then Mrs. Kowalski is lying, or you're lying about what she said. Mom, please don't make this harder than it has to be. I'm trying to help you. You need someone to manage things now. Things like my house, things like my bank accounts, things like the life insurance policy your father left me." The words came out sharper than I'd intended, but the moment I said them, I saw the truth clearly. This wasn't about concern. This was about control, and probably about money. "I can't talk to you when you're like this," Celestine said. "I'll see you at the hearing. I hope you'll be reasonable." She hung up. I stood in my perfectly maintained home, surrounded by evidence of my competence, and understood that my daughter had decided I was no longer useful as a person, only as an asset. Chapter 2. Building my defense. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table with the guardianship petition spread before me, going through it line by line, documenting every false claim with evidence to the contrary. By dawn, I had a list of 15 lies, and corresponding proof that each one was fabricated. The hardest part wasn't the anger or the betrayal, though both burned in my chest like acid. The hardest part was understanding that my only child, the girl I'd rocked through nightmares and nursed through pneumonia and put through college while working 2 jobs, had decided that erasing my autonomy was acceptable, had decided it was even necessary. At 7 a.m, I called Janet Ostrovsky, a friend from book club whose son was an attorney. She answered on the second ring, her voice alert despite the early hour. "Celestia, what's wrong?" I explained the situation, my voice cracking only once when I got to the part about Celestine claiming I'd had multiple car accidents. "And I haven't had so much as a fender bender in 15 years, Janet. My insurance company would have records." "Why would she say that?" "Because she's building a case," Janet said grimly, "and she's counting on you not fighting back. My son, Marcus, specializes in elder law. I'm calling him right now. Don't sign anything. Don't agree to anything. And document everything." Marcus Ostrovsky met with me that afternoon in his office downtown. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe 40, with kind eyes and a direct manner that I appreciated. "Mrs. Pritchard, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. Guardianship cases are serious, and they're often filed with good intentions, but they can also be abused. The fact that your daughter filed this without discussing it with you first, without trying other interventions, and the fact that these allegations are demonstrably false, suggests this might not be about your welfare. It's about my house," I said, "and probably the money Roland left me. She's been asking about selling the house for 2 years now. Says I don't need all that space, that I should move into a senior community. What she means is that she needs the equity." Marcus nodded. "Has she asked you for money recently?" I thought back. 6 months ago, she wanted $50,000 for her husband's business venture. Some cryptocurrency thing I didn't understand. I said no. She didn't take it well. "Okay," Marcus made notes. "Here's what we're going to do. First, you're going to get a comprehensive evaluation from a geriatric psychiatrist, not just your regular doctor, but a specialist who can provide detailed testimony about your cognitive abilities. Second, we're going to gather witnesses who can testify to your independence and competence. Third, we're going to get documentation of every bill you've paid, every appointment you've kept, every responsibility you've managed. And fourth, you're going to consider updating your power of attorney and healthcare directives to remove Celestine and appoint someone you actually trust." The last part hit me hard. I'd made Celestine my power of attorney when she turned 25, thinking it was the responsible thing to do. Now that document could be used against me. "Who would I appoint instead?" I asked. "I don't have other children. My sister died 3 years ago. Do you have any close friends? Anyone you'd trust with those decisions if you truly couldn't make them yourself?" I thought of Janet, of my book club, of Reverend Michaels at the church I'd attended for 30 years. "Yes," I said, "I have people." "Good. Then we fight this. And Mrs. Pritchard, I want you to understand something. Even if we win, which I believe we will, your relationship with your daughter will likely never recover. You need to be prepared for that." I looked at this young man, who was being more honest with me than my own child had been. "Mr. Ostrovsky, I think that relationship died the moment she filed these papers. I'm just now finding out about it. Over the next 10 days, I moved through my life with new purpose. Dr. Greta Zimmerman, a geriatric psychiatrist, spent 4 hours with me across 2 sessions, putting me through cognitive tests, memory exercises, and psychological evaluations. At the end, she shook my head and said, "Mrs. Pritchard, you're sharper than most people half your age. There's absolutely no evidence of cognitive decline, dementia, or any condition that would justify guardianship." I collected bank statements showing decades of responsible financial management. I gathered letters from friends, from my supervisor at the volunteer library, from Reverend Michaels. Each one testified to my independence, my competence, my active engagement with life. Mrs. Kowalski, when I confronted her directly, had the grace to look ashamed. "Celestine asked me if I'd ever worried about you," she admitted, standing on her porch and not meeting my eyes. "I mentioned that one time I'd seen you walking around the neighborhood and you seemed preoccupied. I didn't know she'd twisted into something else. I'm sorry, Celestia. I'll testify to the truth if you need me to. I need you to, I said. Chapter 3. The Underlying Truth. But the most revealing piece of information came from an unexpected source. My neighbor 3 houses down, Theodore Vance, stopped me as I was checking my mail one afternoon. Theodore was 72, a retired accountant who spent his days woodworking in his garage and his evenings on his porch watching the neighborhood. Celestia, I need to tell you something, he said, his weathered face troubled. About 2 months ago, I saw Celestine and her husband at your house when your car wasn't there. I wouldn't have thought anything of it, except they were there for almost 2 hours, and when they left, they were carrying boxes. My blood went cold. Boxes of what? I don't know, but they looked like they were taking inventory of something. I almost came over to ask if you knew they were there, but I figured you'd given them permission. Now, with all this guardianship business, I'm wondering if you knew about it at all. I hadn't known. I kept spare keys under a decorative rock by the back door, the same place I'd kept them for years, so Celestine could let herself in during emergencies. It had never occurred to me that she'd use that access without telling me. When I told Marcus about this, his expression darkened. We need to check your house for anything missing, and we need to document this. If she's been removing items without your knowledge, that's theft, guardianship petition or not. I spent a painful evening going through my house, checking jewelry boxes and file cabinets and closets. Most things seemed to be there, but when I got to the lockbox where I kept important papers, I found it empty. The deed to my house, which I'd kept there, copies of insurance policies, investment account statements, my will, all of it was gone. She took my papers, I told Marcus the next morning, my voice shaking with fury and something deeper. Grief. She came into my house and took documentation of everything I own. That's going to help us, Marcus said grimly. It shows intent and planning. She wasn't just responding to concerns, she was orchestrating this. I updated my power of attorney, removing Celestine and appointing Janet Ostrovsky instead. I updated my healthcare directive. I wrote a new will with Marcus's help, leaving the house to a charity that helped elderly people remain independent. Celestine would still inherit some money, but not the house, not the bulk of the estate. If she wanted to treat me as an obstacle to be legally removed, she could live with the consequences. The night before the hearing, I sat alone in my living room, looking at photos of Celestine's childhood. There she was at 5, gap-toothed and laughing, covered in mud from helping me plant tomatoes. At 10, serious and focused at her first piano recital. At 16, beautiful in her prom dress, Roland's eyes looking out from her face. At 22, graduating college, hugging me so tight I could barely breathe. When had it changed? Or had it always been there, and I'd been too blinded by mother love to see it? Had I raised someone capable of this kind of betrayal, or had life and her husband and disappointment twisted her into someone I no longer recognized? I didn't know, and the not knowing hurt almost as much as the betrayal itself. I went to bed that night with my alarm set for 5:30. I wanted time to dress carefully, to present myself exactly as I was, a competent, independent woman who would not go quietly into someone else's control. Tomorrow, I would defend my right to exist on my own terms. Tomorrow, I would face my daughter across a courtroom and fight for my freedom. And tomorrow, win or lose, something fundamental would break between us that could never be repaired. I was ready for that. I had to be. Chapter 4. The Courtroom. The courthouse in downtown Asheville was a building I'd passed hundreds of times, but never entered. It sat on College Street, imposing and gray, with steps that seemed designed to make people feel small. I climbed them slowly, not because I couldn't move faster, but because I wanted to arrive calm and centered. Marcus walked beside me, carrying a briefcase thick with documentation. "Remember," he said quietly, "answer the questions clearly and directly. Don't get emotional, even if they try to provoke you. We have the evidence. We have the witnesses. The truth is on our side." The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected from television. Judge Helena Blackstone presided, a woman in her mid-50s with steel-gray hair and an expression that gave nothing away. Celestine sat at the petitioner's table with her attorney, a sharp-featured man named Gerard Sutcliffe, who looked like he charged by the minute. My daughter wouldn't meet my eyes. She'd dressed carefully, too. Conservative navy suit, Minimal makeup, hair pulled back. She looked worried and responsible, like a concerned daughter doing something difficult but necessary. I wondered if she'd practiced that expression in the mirror. Judge Blackstone called the hearing to order. This is a petition for guardianship filed by Ms. Celestine Maeve Pritchard, regarding her mother, Mrs. Celeste Wilhelmina Pritchard. Mr. Sutcliffe, present your case. What followed was a character assassination delivered in legal language. Sutcliffe painted me as a confused, vulnerable woman slipping into dementia, unable to manage basic tasks, a danger to myself and potentially others. He called Mrs. Kowalski as a witness first. Mrs. Kowalski, have you observed concerning behavior from Mrs. Pritchard? Mrs. Kowalski looked uncomfortable. Well, I did see her wandering the neighborhood once, looking confused. And did she explain why she was wandering? She said she was looking for my cat, but you didn't ask her to do that, did you? Mrs. Kowalski hesitated. Actually, I did. My cat had gotten out, and I was frantic. Celestia offered to help look. Sutcliffe frowned. That's not what's in your initial statement to Miss Pritchard. My initial statement was based on a phone conversation where I mentioned seeing Celestia walking around. Ms. Pritchard asked if I'd been worried, and I said I'd wondered what she was doing, but I didn't say she was confused or lost. That was her interpretation. Judge Blackstone made a note. Continue, Mr. Sutcliffe. He called 2 other neighbors, but their testimony followed the same pattern. Vague concerns that, when pressed, turned out to be misunderstandings or deliberately twisted statements. Then he played his stronger card. Your Honor, we have evidence that Mrs. Pritchard's utilities were disconnected due to non-payment, indicating she's unable to manage her finances. Marcus stood. Your Honor, we have documentation showing that Mrs. Pritchard's utilities have never been disconnected. Every bill for the past 32 years has been paid in full and on time. We'd like to enter these records into evidence. The documents were passed forward. Judge Blackstone reviewed them, her expression unchanged. Mr. Sutcliffe, where did you get information about utility disconnection? From my client, who was informed by her mother's neighbors. Which neighbors? A pause. I'd need to check my notes. Please do so. While Sutcliffe shuffled papers, looking increasingly uncomfortable, I watched Celestine. She was whispering urgently to him, her face flushed. This wasn't going the way she'd planned. Chapter 5. Truth Under Oath. When it was Marcus's turn, he methodically dismantled every claim. He presented Dr. Zimmerman's evaluation, comprehensive and damning to Celestine's case. He called witnesses who testified to my active, independent life. Reverend Michaels spoke about my volunteer work. The head librarian described my organizational skills and reliability. Janet testified to our book club discussions, my sharp memory, my engaged mind. Then Marcus called me to the stand. Mrs. Pritchard, how old are you? 67. And how long have you lived independently? Since my husband died 32 years ago. Before that, we lived together, but I managed the household finances and maintenance even then. Do you have any cognitive difficulties? Memory problems? Confusion? No. I was evaluated by Dr. Zimmerman, who found no evidence of decline. I also have regular checkups with Dr. Hammond, my primary physician. All my medical records show I'm in good health for my age. Mrs. Pritchard, your daughter claims she filed this petition out of concern for your welfare. Has she expressed these concerns to you directly before filing? I took a breath. No. The first I knew of any supposed concerns was when I found the guardianship papers on my door. Prior to that, our last several conversations had been about her wanting me to sell my house and move to a smaller place. I declined. She was not happy about that decision. Why did she want you to sell your house? Sutcliffe objected. Relevance, Your Honor. I'll allow it. Judge Blackstone said. Answer the question, Mrs. Pritchard. She and her husband wanted access to the equity. They'd asked to borrow $50,000 6 months ago for a business investment. I said no. Shortly after that, she began suggesting I was too old to maintain the house, that I needed to downsize. When I continued to refuse, she stopped calling as often. Now this. Marcus nodded. Mrs. Pritchard, do you live alone by choice? Yes. I have friends. I have activities. I have purpose. I'm not lonely or struggling. I'm living my life on my terms, and I'm doing it successfully. Thank you. No further questions. Sutcliffe's cross-examination was aggressive. He tried to make me seem defensive. tried to catch me in contradictions, tried to paint my refusal to move as stubbornness rather than preference. But I'd been warned this would happen, and I kept my answers calm and factual. Mrs. Pritchard, isn't it true that as we age, we become less capable of recognizing our own decline? That can be true, which is why I've been evaluated by medical professionals who specialize in exactly that assessment. They found no decline. But you must admit that your daughter wouldn't go through this process without genuine concern. I admit that my daughter filed these papers. I cannot speak to her motivations, but the evidence shows her claims are false. When I stepped down, I felt steady. I'd told the truth clearly and without emotion. I'd presented myself exactly as I was. Then, Celestine took the stand. Chapter 6, A Daughter's Testimony. Watching my daughter testify against me was like watching a stranger wear her face. She'd prepared carefully, her voice trembling with what sounded like genuine emotion. "I've been so worried about Mom," she said, dabbing at dry eyes with a tissue. "She's always been so independent, so strong, but lately, she's been different, forgetful, withdrawn. She stopped returning my calls. When she did answer, she seemed confused about what day it was, about appointments she'd made. It was masterfully done. Each lie was cushioned in enough truth to seem plausible. Yes, I'd sometimes not returned her calls immediately. Yes, I'd been less warm in our conversations, but it was because I'd been pulling away from her constant pressure about the house, not because I was confused or declining. "Ms. Pritchard," Marcus said when it was his turn, "you testified that your mother seemed confused about appointments. Can you give a specific example?" Celestine hesitated. "Well, she mentioned she had a doctor's appointment but couldn't remember when it was. Did you follow up to verify whether she actually missed the appointment?" "No, because Mrs. Pritchard attended her doctor's appointment on the scheduled date, as her medical records show. So either she wasn't actually confused, or you didn't check to see if your concerns were valid. Which is it?" "I was concerned. That's what matters." "Is it? Because you didn't call her doctor. You didn't arrange for a medical evaluation. You didn't discuss your concerns with her directly, or try any less drastic intervention. Instead, you filed for complete guardianship, which would give you control over her finances, her property, and her medical decisions. That's quite a leap from concern, isn't it?" Sutcliffe objected, but the damage was done. Judge Blackstone was watching Celestine with new attention. "Miss Pritchard," Marcus continued, "did you remove documents from your mother's house without her knowledge approximately 2 months ago?" Celestine's face went pale. "I don't know what you're talking about. You have a key to her house. You were seen entering with your husband and leaving with boxes. What was in those boxes?" "I have a right to visit my mother's house." "That's not what I asked." "What was in the boxes?" "Some old family photos, things I wanted to preserve. Without asking her permission, without even telling her. I didn't think she'd mind." Marcus pulled out a document. "Your Honor, I have a statement from Mrs. Pritchard detailing items missing from her lockbox, including the deed to her house, insurance policies, and her will." "Miss Pritchard, did you take these documents?" Silence. Then, quietly, "I took them for safekeeping. She's not good at organizing important papers. She's maintained those papers successfully for 3 decades. But you took them 2 months ago and filed for guardianship shortly after. That suggests planning, not concern." Judge Blackstone intervened. "Mr. Ostrovsky, I believe you've made your point. Miss Pritchard, you may step down." Celestine left the stand, her composure cracking. She wouldn't look at me as she passed. Chapter 7. The ruling Judge Blackstone called a brief recess before delivering her decision. Marcus and I sat in the hallway, not speaking. There was nothing left to say. We'd presented the truth. Either it would be enough, or it wouldn't. When we returned, the courtroom felt colder. Celestine sat rigidly at her table. I could see tension in the line of her shoulders, in the way her hands gripped the armrests. "I've reviewed the evidence and testimony," Judge Blackstone began. "Guardianship is an extreme measure, reserved for individuals who genuinely cannot care for themselves. It removes fundamental rights and should never be granted lightly. In this case, the petition alleges that Mrs. Celeste Pritchard is incapacitated and unable to manage her own affairs. However, The evidence presented does not support these allegations. I felt Marcus's hand briefly touch my shoulder, a silent signal of support. Medical evaluations from both Mrs. Pritchard's primary physician and a geriatric specialist show no cognitive decline. Financial records demonstrate decades of responsible management. Witness testimony confirms an active, engaged individual with strong community ties. The concerns raised by the petitioner appear to be based on misunderstandings at best and misrepresentations at worst. Judge Blackstone's gaze shifted to Celestine. More troubling is the evidence that Ms. Celestine Pritchard removed documents from her mother's home without permission, and that this guardianship petition was filed shortly after Mrs. Pritchard refused a substantial financial request. This suggests motivations beyond mere concern for her mother's welfare. Your Honor, Sutcliffe began, but Judge Blackstone held up a hand. I'm not finished. The relationship between parent and child is sacred. When an adult child seeks guardianship, we expect it to be done with the parent's best interests as the sole motivation. In this case, I find that motivation suspect. The petition for guardianship is denied. Furthermore, I'm ordering Ms. Celestine Pritchard to return all documents taken from her mother's home within 7 days. Failure to do so will result in contempt charges. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was heavy with disappointment. Miss Pritchard, what you've done here is unconscionable. You attempted to strip your mother of her autonomy based on fabricated concerns and financial interest. I'm imposing a fine of $5,000 for filing a frivolous petition in bad faith. Additionally, Mrs. Celeste Pritchard is entitled to recover her legal costs from you. The gavel came down. It was over. Marcus was shaking my hand, gathering papers, speaking about next steps and documentation. I heard him as if from a distance. Across the courtroom, Celestine stood frozen, Sutcliffe speaking urgently to her. She looked at me finally, and in her face I saw anger, humiliation, and something that might have been fear. She mouthed something. It looked like, I'm sorry, but it might have been, how dare you? I'd never know which. Chapter 8. The Aftermath. The week following the hearing moved in strange slow motion. Celestine returned my documents by courier, not bringing them herself. No note accompanied them, no apology, no explanation, just my deed, my insurance papers, my will, dumped into a box and left on my porch like garbage. I filed them away properly, checking to make sure everything was accounted for. It was... Even the family photos she'd claimed to want were there, tossed carelessly on top. I looked through them that evening, remembering when each was taken. Celestine at her high school graduation, Roland and me at our 20th anniversary, Celestine's wedding, her face radiant with possibility. I put them in an album and placed it on the shelf with the others. Maybe someday she'd want them back. Maybe not. Either way, I wouldn't throw them away. The fine and legal costs were paid within the deadline. Again, no contact. Just a check and a receipt. I'd expected anger, maybe another attempt at contact even if hostile. The silence was somehow worse. Janet came by often during those first weeks. How are you holding up? She'd ask, and I'd give her the truthful answer. I didn't know. I'd won the case, kept my independence, proven the allegations false, but I'd lost my daughter in the process, and that loss had a weight that no victory could offset. She might come around, Janet said one afternoon as we sat on my porch, watching the November light fade early. Give her time. She'll realize she was wrong. Will she? I asked, because what I saw in that courtroom wasn't someone who'd made a mistake. It was someone who'd calculated every step and only regretted that it didn't work. That's not someone who admits wrongdoing. That's someone who resents being caught. Janet didn't have an answer for that. I continued my routines. Library volunteering, book club, church, the garden, preparing it for winter. My life was full and purposeful, exactly as it had been before. But now there was an absence in it. A daughter-shaped hole that I couldn't fill with activities or friendships or even righteous anger. Theodore Vance stopped by one evening with a bottle of wine and an apology. I should have told you sooner about seeing Celestine there, he said. I should have checked with you right away. You told me when it mattered, I said. That's what counts. We sat in companionable silence, drinking wine and watching the stars emerge. Finally, he said, my son did something similar to me 5 years ago. Tried to get me declared incompetent so he could control my pension. I fought it, won, and we haven't spoken since. Does it get easier? I asked. You learn to live with it. That's not the same as easier. You learn that some people, even people you raised, are capable of prioritizing their wants over your dignity. And you learn that maintaining your dignity is more important than maintaining a relationship built on their disrespect. It was the most honest answer anyone had given me. Chapter 9. The Holidays. Thanksgiving approached. For 37 years, Celestine had come home for Thanksgiving. Even after Roland died, even after she married, even during years when money was tight and the drive was long, it was our tradition, sacred and unbreakable. Until now, I waited for a call that didn't come. I prepared anyway, half hoping, cooking the dishes we'd always made together. Turkey, dressing, sweet potato casserole, cranberry sauce from Roland's mother's recipe. The house filled with familiar smells, but the table was silent. At 3 o'clock, when we'd traditionally eat, I sat down alone. I said grace for the food, for my health, for the roof over my head. I couldn't bring myself to say grace for my daughter. Halfway through the meal, my phone rang. For a moment, my heart leaped, but it was Janet, calling to invite me to join her family's celebration. I almost declined out of pride, but pride had cost me enough already. I'll be there in 20 minutes, I said. Janet's Thanksgiving was noisy, chaotic, full of grandchildren and laughter, and the comfortable chaos of a family that genuinely enjoyed being together. Her son Marcus was there with his wife and twin daughters. They welcomed me warmly, made space at the crowded table, asked about my garden and my volunteer work and whether I'd read the new mystery novel book club had chosen. No one mentioned the hearing. No one looked at me with pity. I was simply another guest, another friend, valued for myself and not for some familial obligation. As I drove home that evening, full and tired and oddly content, I realized something. I'd been afraid of losing Celestine because I'd thought it meant losing family. But family wasn't just blood. It was the people who showed up, who made space, who valued you. I had that. It just didn't look the way I'd expected it to. December came with early snow. I decorated my house the way I always had. Lights along the porch, wreath on the door, small tree in the living room window. I'd thought about skipping it. What was the point of decorating for one person? But then I'd thought, I'm not decorating for anyone else. I'm decorating because I like it, because it's beautiful, because joy doesn't require an audience. Christmas cards arrived from friends, from people at church, from my cousin in Tennessee, none from Celestine. I'd sent her one anyway, a simple card with no message beyond Merry Christmas, Mom. I didn't know if she'd throw it away or keep it. I didn't know if it mattered. On Christmas Eve, I attended midnight service at church. The sanctuary was candlelit, intimate, filled with faces I'd known for years. Reverend Michael's sermon was about grace and forgiveness, about releasing resentment and finding peace. He didn't know about my situation, but his words felt personal anyway. Forgiveness doesn't mean pretending harm didn't happen, he said. It means refusing to let that harm continue to poison your present. It means choosing your own peace over their punishment. Could I do that? Could I forgive Celestine for what she'd tried to do? I didn't know, but maybe I could forgive myself for not being enough to prevent it, for not seeing it coming, for raising a daughter who valued money over my dignity. Walking home through the silent, snow-covered streets, I felt something shift. Not forgiveness, not yet, but maybe the beginning of acceptance. This was my life now. A good life, a purposeful life, but one that didn't include the daughter I'd raised. I could rail against that reality, or I could accept it and build something meaningful anyway. I chose acceptance. Chapter 10. A New Year. January brought bitter cold and a kind of clarity. I'd survived the holidays alone and discovered I was stronger than I'd thought. But I'd also discovered something else. The lawsuit and all its stress had taken a toll. I was tired in a way that sleep didn't fix. I went back to Dr. Hammond for a checkup. Your blood pressure is high, she said, frowning at the numbers. Higher than it's ever been. Are you under unusual stress? I laughed without humor. You could say that. We talked about the guardianship case, about Celestine, about everything. Dr. Hammond listened with the same careful attention she'd given my physical symptoms. Celestia, I'm going to be very frank with you. The stress from this situation is affecting your health. Not in ways that justify anyone claiming you're incompetent, but in ways that matter. Your blood pressure is concerning. You're not sleeping well. I can see the weight you've lost. You need to take care of yourself. I am taking care of myself. I'm living my life. You're going through the motions. That's not the same thing. Have you considered seeing a therapist? Not because there's anything wrong with you, but because processing this kind of betrayal is real work, and it's okay to need help with it. I'd never been to therapy. Roland and I had been raised in a generation that handled problems privately, that didn't air family business to strangers. But that approach had given me a daughter who thought she could erase my autonomy without consequence. Can you recommend someone? I asked. Dr. Hammond gave me 3 names. I chose Dr. Vanessa Kimura, a psychologist who specialized in family trauma and elder issues. Our first session was in late January, on a gray afternoon that matched my mood. Dr. Kimura was in her 50s, calm and unhurried in a way that made it easy to talk. "Tell me about your daughter," she said. And I did. I told her about raising Celestine alone after Roland died, about working multiple jobs to give her opportunities, about being proud when she graduated college, when she started her career, when she seemed to be building a good life. And when did things change? Dr. Kimura asked. I don't know if they changed, or if I just finally saw what was always there. She's always been ambitious, driven. That wasn't bad in itself. But somewhere along the way, ambition became entitlement. My house became her inheritance to access, not my home to live in. My money became her safety net, not my security. I became an obstacle, not a person. That must have been devastating to realize. It still is, because I keep wondering what I did wrong. How do you raise someone for nearly 40 years and end up with a stranger who'd rather take your rights than respect your choices? Dr. Kimura leaned forward. Celestia, I want you to hear this clearly. You didn't make her do this. She made choices as an adult, based on her own values and priorities. You can examine your parenting, and that's healthy, but you can't take responsibility for her actions. She's not a child anymore. She's a grown woman who decided that getting what she wanted was more important than your dignity. That's on her. The words should have been comforting. Instead, they made me cry for the first time since the hearing, because if it wasn't my fault, then it was simply tragic, random. A daughter who should have loved me had chosen money instead, and there was no fixing it, no lesson learned, no redemption arc. It just was. Chapter 11. Moving forward. February brought the first hints of spring. Crocuses pushed through the melting snow in my garden. I started planning this year's planting, pulling out catalogs, marking varieties I wanted to try. I'd always gardened with the future in mind, planting perennials that would bloom years from now. I saw no reason to stop. My therapy sessions with Dr. Kimura continued. We worked through grief and anger and the complicated tangle of loving someone who'd hurt you deliberately. I learned that I could acknowledge the good parts of my relationship with Celestine, the years of ordinary motherhood before this betrayal, without pretending the betrayal hadn't happened. Both things could be true. I also learned that I wasn't alone in this experience. Dr. Kimura shared statistics on elder financial abuse, guardianship abuse, family estrangement. It was depressingly common. Other families, other parents, other stories of children who decided their parents' autonomy was negotiable. Knowing I wasn't alone didn't make it hurt less, but it made it feel less personal somehow. This wasn't about my failure. This was about a cultural problem, about adult children who felt entitled to control and resources. In March, I received an unexpected letter, not from Celestine, but from her husband, Warren. I almost threw it away unread, but curiosity won. The letter was brief and businesslike. Dear Mrs. Pritchard, I want you to know that I was not aware of the extent of Celestine's plans regarding the guardianship petition. I knew she was worried about you, but I did not know she'd fabricated evidence or taken your documents. When I found out the full truth after the hearing, we had a serious conversation about her actions. I won't speak to the state of our marriage, but I wanted you to know that I don't condone what she did. Warren. I read it 3 times, trying to decide what it meant. Was he apologizing on her behalf? Distancing himself from her actions? Explaining why they might be divorcing? I'd never know unless he wrote again, and somehow I doubted he would. I showed the letter to Dr. Kimura in our next session. "Oh, what do you think it means?" she asked. "I think it means Celestine's choices are catching up with her, not just with me, but in her marriage, her relationships. I think Warren is a decent person who's realizing he married someone who isn't, and I think I feel sad for him. Do you feel sad for Celestine? I considered that carefully. No, I feel sad about her, about what she became, what she's lost. But I don't feel sad for her. She made her choices knowing the potential consequences. She just didn't think she'd have to face them. Spring arrived in earnest. I planted my garden with help from Theodore, who'd become a surprising friend. We worked in companionable silence, our hands in the dirt, preparing ground for new growth. It felt metaphorical in a way that wasn't subtle but wasn't wrong either. I was preparing ground too, in my own life, making space for new things to take root. The legal costs that Celestine had been ordered to pay were deposited into my account. I used part of it to establish a small fund at the local senior center, earmarked for legal assistance for elderly people facing guardianship abuse. I named it the Roland Pritchard Independence Fund, after my husband. He would have approved. I didn't do it for Celestine's benefit or to make a point. I did it because something good should come from this pain, because other people shouldn't have to face what I'd faced alone and without resources. Chapter 12. The final season. Summer came, and with it, the kind of settled peace that comes not from having everything you wanted, but from accepting what you have. My garden thrived. I continued my volunteer work, my book club, my routines. I saw Janet regularly, shared dinners with Theodore, attended church. My life was full. In August, I received one final communication from Celestine. Not a letter, not a call, but an email, brief and formal. Mom, I've been in therapy working through my actions. My therapist suggested I reach out to apologize. I'm sorry for the guardianship case. I was wrong to file it, and wrong about my motivations. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to know I understand what I did was harmful. I hope you're well. Celestine. I read it several times, looking for something genuine beneath the therapeutic language. I couldn't find it. The apology was there, but it felt obligatory, performed. My therapist suggested meant she wouldn't have done it otherwise. I don't expect forgiveness was a shield against rejection. I showed it to Dr. Kimura. What do you want to do? She asked. I don't know. Part of me wants to respond, to try to rebuild something, but another part knows that what she did can't be undone with an email apology. She tried to erase my autonomy. She lied about me in court. She took my documents. Those aren't mistakes you move past with therapy homework. You don't have to decide right now. You can sit with it. I sat with it for a week. Then I wrote a response, short and honest. Celestine, I received your email. I appreciate the apology. I hope therapy helps you understand why you made the choices you did. I'm not ready for a relationship right now. Perhaps someday that will change. I wish you well. Mom. I sent it and felt nothing. Not relief, not anger, not hope. Just closure of a sort. Life continued its rhythm. Seasons changed. I turned 68, celebrated quietly with friends. I updated my will again, adding provisions for the senior center fund. I made sure my affairs were genuinely in order, not because I expected to need guardianship, but because I wanted my end-of-life wishes clearly documented. When the time came, I'd face it with dignity and planning. On a cool October evening, exactly a year after I'd found the guardianship papers on my door, I sat on my porch and thought about everything that had happened. I'd lost my daughter, or perhaps discovered I'd never truly had the daughter I thought I did. I'd fought for my independence and won, but the victory had been expensive in ways that had nothing to do with legal fees. I'd learned that family was both more and less than blood. That love wasn't enough if it wasn't backed by respect. That you could do everything right and still end up hurt by the people you raised. That strength wasn't about never breaking. It was about continuing after you'd been broken. The house behind me was mine, legally and finally. My name on the deed. My choices about what happened within its walls. I'd protected that, and it mattered. But I'd also learned that autonomy without connection was cold comfort. I had friends, community, purpose. But the absence of my daughter was a grief that wouldn't fully heal. Theodore joined me on the porch, bringing 2 mugs of tea. We sat in silence, watching the autumn leaves spiral down. Finally, he said, "You did the right thing, you know, fighting for yourself." I know, but that doesn't make it hurt less. No, it doesn't. But here's what I've learned in my 72 years. Doing the right thing often hurts. But not doing it hurts worse and longer. You have your dignity. You have your home. You have your life on your terms. That's not nothing. It's not, I agreed. It's just not everything. We finished our tea as darkness fell. The house behind us glowed with warm light. Inside were decades of memories, carefully preserved. Outside was a community I'd built through years of showing up, of being present, of choosing connection even when family failed me. I thought about Celestine sometimes, wondered if she ever thought about me, wondered if she'd understood yet what she'd lost in trying to gain control, wondered if she ever would. But those thoughts came less frequently now, with less intensity. I was learning to live with the loss instead of fighting against it. My life was smaller than I'd once expected it to be. No grandchildren to spoil, no daughter to call on Sundays, no family gatherings where my house filled with laughter and chaos. But it was mine, lived on my terms, with people who chose to be there rather than those obligated by blood. Sometimes that was enough, sometimes it wasn't. Both things were true, and I'd learned to accept the paradox. The November wind picked up, carrying the scent of wood smoke and fallen leaves. I finished my tea and stood, ready to go inside to my quiet, autonomous, hard-won life. It wasn't the life I'd planned, but it was the life I'd fought for, defended, and earned. And in the end, that had to be enough. Epilogue. Years pass differently when you've survived betrayal. They don't heal you so much as teach you to carry the weight differently. I'm 71 now. My garden still blooms every spring. I still volunteer at the library. Theodore passed away last winter, peacefully in his sleep, and I miss him more than I expected to miss someone I'd known for such a short time. But that's the thing about late-life friendships. They're intense, because you both know time is precious. I never heard from Celestine again after that one email. I don't know if she's still married, still in therapy, still working through what she did. I don't check her social media. I don't ask mutual acquaintances. I've learned that sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself is stop looking for answers that don't exist. Janet's son Marcus still waves when he sees me around town. The senior center fund I established has helped 3 other elderly people fight inappropriate guardianship petitions. 2 won. One lost and is now in a nursing home against their will, their house sold, their autonomy gone. I visit her sometimes. We don't talk about our cases. We just sit together. 2 women who understand what it means to fight for the right to exist on your own terms. Some lessons can only be learned through pain. I learned that love isn't enough if it isn't backed by respect. That family means nothing if it doesn't come with basic human decency. That you can survive betrayal by someone you raised, but survival isn't the same as recovery. That doing the right thing, protecting yourself, fighting for your dignity, might cost you everything you thought you wanted. But I also learned that when everything you thought you wanted is taken away, you discover what you actually need. And sometimes, you build something better from the ruins. My house is still mine. My life is still mine. My choices are still mine. On the hard days, when the absence of the daughter I'd hoped to have weighs heavy, that's enough. On the good days, it's more than enough. It's everything. And perhaps that's the real lesson, that enough is not settling. Enough is knowing your worth, defending your boundaries, and building a life that honors your dignity even when others won't. Enough is surviving with your soul intact. Enough is choosing peace over punishment, self-respect over family obligation. I am enough. I always was. It just took losing almost everything to learn it. An extended epilogue. The weight of years. The seasons have a way of marking time that clocks and calendars never quite capture. I'm 71 now, and I measure my life not in birthdays but in garden cycles, in the reliable return of crocuses through melting snow, in the way the light slants differently through my kitchen window as winter gives way to spring. It's been 4 years since I stood in that courtroom and fought for the right to remain myself. 4 years since I learned that the daughter I raised could look at me and see only an obstacle to be legally removed. Time doesn't heal betrayal the way people promise it will. That's one of those comforting lies we tell each other because the truth is too heavy to carry in casual conversation. Time doesn't heal. It teaches you to redistribute the weight so you can keep walking. Some mornings I wake up, and the first thought isn't about Celestine. Those are good mornings. Other mornings I wake up and remember before I'm fully conscious, and the grief sits on my chest like a physical thing. Those mornings are harder, but I've learned to navigate them. Theodore died last January. I found out when his daughter called me. Someone I'd never met but who'd heard about me from her father. He talked about you often, she said. Her voice warm despite the grief. Said you were one of the few people who understood what it meant to be betrayed by your own child and still choose to live fully anyway. The funeral was small. Theodore had outlived most of his generation. And his son, the one who'd tried to have him declared incompetent 5 years before I met him, didn't attend. But his daughter was there, and 3 grandchildren, and a handful of neighbors who'd known him as the quiet man who made beautiful furniture and kept his word. I sat in the back of the church and cried for my friend, for the companionship we'd built in the margins of our lives, for the particular loneliness of surviving the people who understand your specific kind of pain. After the service, Theodore's daughter approached me. "Dad left something for you," she said, handing me a wooden box, small and perfectly crafted. He made it last fall. Said you'd know what it was for. I opened it later, alone in my kitchen. Inside was a note in Theodore's careful handwriting. For Celestia, to hold the things worth keeping. The box was lined with velvet, sized perfectly for photographs or letters or small treasures. I understood immediately. It wasn't about what to put in it. It was about having a container for the good memories, a way to separate them from the betrayal, to acknowledge that both could exist simultaneously. I spent an evening going through old photos, selecting carefully. Celestine at 5, laughing in a pile of autumn leaves. At 12, serious and focused while helping me bake Roland's birthday cake. At 18, the day she left for college, standing on this same porch with tears in her eyes, telling me she loved me and would call every Sunday. And she had for years, until she didn't. I put 10 photographs in Theodore's box. 10 moments when my daughter had been exactly who I'd hoped she'd be. Then I closed the lid and put it on the shelf in my bedroom. The betrayal didn't erase those moments. But those moments didn't excuse the betrayal either. Both were true. The box let me hold both truths without letting either one consume me. Janet comes by most Tuesday afternoons now. We've evolved past book club into something deeper. A friendship forged not through shared interests, but through shared witness. She was there for the guardianship hearing. She testified on my behalf. She watched me rebuild my life from the wreckage of maternal hope. That kind of witness creates bonds that casual friendships never achieve. "Have you heard from her?" Janet asks sometimes, carefully, as if the question itself might shatter me. "No," I say, and I don't expect to. The truth is more complicated than that simple no, but some truths are too nuanced for casual conversation. I think about Celestine more than I admit. I wonder if she thinks about me. I wonder if she ever truly understood what she tried to do, or if she's rewritten the narrative in her mind until she's the victim, misunderstood and wrongly vilified for trying to help her difficult mother. I received one piece of information about her, unsolicited, about 2 years ago. Warren, her husband, filed for divorce. I know this because his attorney contacted mine, wanting to ensure that if any joint property claims arose involving Celestine's potential inheritance, my estate was properly protected. Marcus handled it efficiently, reminding Warren's attorney that Celestine had no claim on my estate beyond what I chose to leave her, which was minimal. "Did Warren say why they divorced?" I asked Marcus, hating myself for asking but unable to stop. Marcus hesitated. He indicated that the guardianship incident revealed character issues he couldn't reconcile with his own values. He's remarried now, apparently, moved to Colorado. So Warren had found his line, the boundary of what he could accept, and Celestine had crossed it. I felt a complicated mixture of vindication and sorrow. Vindication that someone else had seen what I'd seen, that I wasn't crazy or oversensitive or failing to understand my own daughter. Sorrow that Celestine's choices were isolating her from everyone who'd ever mattered in her life. But mostly, I felt nothing. That's the strangest part of grief that's been carried long enough. It becomes ambient, background noise you learn to function around. Celestine's divorce was simply another piece of information about a person who used to be my daughter, but was now a stranger who happened to share my DNA. The senior center fund I established, the Roland Pritchard Independence Fund, has grown beyond what I initially imagined. Donations come in regularly, small amounts from people who've heard the stories of elder abuse and want to help. Last year, the fund helped 7 people fight inappropriate guardianship petitions. 5 won, 2 lost. I visit one of the ones who lost. Her name is Dorothy Threnholm, and she's 73. Her son convinced a judge that she couldn't manage her affairs, sold her house, and moved her into a nursing home where she sits by the window and watches the parking lot as if waiting for rescue that won't come. The first time I visited her, she looked at me with such desperate hope that I almost couldn't bear it. "Did you come to take me home?" she asked. "No," I said gently. "I came to sit with you, to let you know you're not forgotten. We sit together every other Thursday now. Sometimes we talk about the lives we used to have. Sometimes we sit in silence. Sometimes Dorothy cries, not dramatically but quietly, tears slipping down her weathered face while she stares out at the parking lot. I hold her hand and don't tell her it will be okay, because it won't be. Her son has her power of attorney. Her house is sold. Her independence is gone, legally and irrevocably. I did everything right, she told me once. I raised him. I loved him. I worked 2 jobs to put him through college, and he put me here because he wanted my house money for his business. I know, I said. I know. There's a particular fellowship among those of us who've been betrayed by our children. We recognize each other instantly, see the same wound reflected in different faces. We don't need explanations or justifications. We understand the specific grief of loving someone who decided you were disposable. The nursing home staff treats Dorothy kindly, but with the particular condescension reserved for people who've been legally declared incompetent. They speak slowly, pat her hand, make decisions for her about what she'll eat and when she'll sleep. She's not incompetent. She's trapped. There's a difference, but the law doesn't always recognize it. After each visit, I drive home to my house, the house I fought for and kept, and I feel the weight of survivor's guilt. I won my case. Dorothy lost hers. The difference wasn't competence or need or justice. The difference was resources, timing, and a judge who happened to see through the lies. It could have so easily gone the other way. My health has become a thing I monitor carefully now, not out of paranoia but out of pragmatism. The stress from the guardianship case did damage that I'm still managing. High blood pressure that requires daily medication, occasional heart palpitations that Dr. Hammond watches carefully, insomnia that comes and goes in waves. "You're doing well," Dr. Hammond tells me during checkups. All things considered. All things considered. That phrase carries so much weight. All things considered. I'm healthy for a 71-year-old woman who experienced severe stress and betrayal. All things considered, I'm managing. All things considered, I'm surviving. But I'm also aware of my mortality in a way I wasn't before the guardianship case. I'm aware that time is finite, that my body is aging, that someday I will actually need help managing my affairs. The question is, who will I trust to provide that help when I can no longer manage alone? I've updated my healthcare directive 3 times in 4 years. Janet is currently my primary agent, with Reverend Michaels as secondary and Marcus Ostrovsky as third. I've specified my wishes in excruciating detail, under what circumstances I want life-sustaining treatment, when I want palliative care only, what kind of facility I'd accept if I could no longer live independently. I've made these decisions while I still can so that no one else gets to make them for me. Celestine is mentioned in my will. She inherits $10,000, enough to acknowledge her existence, but not enough to suggest forgiveness or approval. The bulk of my estate goes to the Independence Fund, to Janet's grandchildren's education fund, and to the church. My house, my beloved house that I fought so hard to keep, will be sold and the proceeds divided among these beneficiaries. I used to imagine leaving the house to Celestine, watching her raise her children here the way I raised her. That fantasy died in the courtroom. Now I imagine the house going to a young family who'll love it the way I have, who'll plant gardens and paint walls and build memories that have nothing to do with betrayal or courtrooms or the particular grief of mother-daughter estrangement. The garden has become my meditation, my therapy, my connection to something larger than human betrayal. Plants don't lie. They don't manipulate. They respond honestly to care or neglect. If you water them, they grow. If you ignore them, they die. There's a brutal honesty to gardening that I find comforting. This spring I planted a memorial section for Theodore. Roses, which he loved, and lavender, which he said reminded him of his wife who died 20 years ago. I tend this section carefully, talking to Theodore as I work, telling him about book club and Dorothy and the small dramas of daily life. I don't believe he can hear me, but I believe the act of speaking matters anyway. I miss you, I tell the roses as I deadhead them. You understood things I couldn't explain to anyone else. The neighborhood has changed in 4 years. Young families moving in, older residents moving out or dying. I'm becoming one of the old guard, the woman who's been here forever, who knows the history of every house, who waves from her porch and tends her immaculate garden. Children ride bikes past my house and call out greetings. Their parents stop to ask gardening advice. I'm woven into the fabric of this community in ways that feel permanent, even though I know nothing is truly permanent. Mrs. Kowalski moved away last year, into a retirement community in Florida near her daughter. She apologized to me 3 times before she left, each apology more effusive than the last. I forgave her not because I felt particularly forgiving, but because holding on to that resentment would have cost me more than it cost her. She was manipulated by Celestine. She was foolish and careless with her words, but she wasn't malicious. I could distinguish between the two. The new neighbors who bought her house are a couple in their 40s with 2 teenagers. They're polite, but busy, always rushing somewhere, and we exchange pleasantries without developing real connection. That's fine. Not every relationship needs to be deep. Some people are meant to be friendly neighbors, and nothing more. I think about forgiveness often. Dr. Kimura and I worked on this extensively during our therapy sessions, which continue even now, though less frequently, once a month instead of once a week. Maintenance rather than crisis management. Do you think you'll ever forgive Celestine? Dr. Kimura asked during our last session. I don't know, I said honestly. I'm not even sure what forgiveness would look like in this situation. Does it mean pretending it didn't happen? Does it mean welcoming her back into my life? Does it mean simply releasing the anger? What do you think it means? I considered this carefully. I think forgiveness might mean acknowledging that she's a flawed human being who made terrible choices, and deciding that those choices don't get to define the rest of my life. Not forgetting, not excusing, but refusing to let her betrayal be the central narrative of my existence. Have you achieved that? Some days. Other days I'm still angry. Other days I'm just sad. I don't think forgiveness is a destination you arrive at, and then you're done. I think it's a practice, something you choose over and over again. Dr. Kimura nodded. That's a very mature understanding. How does it feel to carry that? Heavy, I admitted, and but lighter than carrying the alternative. The truth is that some part of me will always be the mother who loved her daughter completely, who would have done anything for her, who believed their bond was unbreakable. That mother still exists inside me, grieving the relationship she thought she had. But she exists alongside the woman who stood in a courtroom and defended her right to autonomy. Both are real. Both are me. I've started volunteering at the senior center beyond just managing the Independence Fund. I teach a class on estate planning and elder rights. Once a month, I sit in a room with other elderly people and explain guardianship laws, power of attorney, healthcare directives, and how to protect yourself from the kind of abuse I experienced. The first time I taught the class, I was terrified. Standing in front of 20 elderly people, telling my story, admitting that my own daughter had tried to have me declared incompetent felt like exposing a wound that hadn't healed. But when I finished, 3 women approached me separately, each one whispering that their adult children had made concerning comments, had started asking about finances, had suggested it might be time to make some changes. What should I do? One woman asked, her eyes frightened. He's my son. I love him, but I'm scared. Document everything, I told her. Get evaluated by a specialist, update your legal documents, and trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. I've become a resource, a cautionary tale, and a success story all at once. People seek me out at church, at the grocery store, in the library. I heard about what happened to you, they say quietly. Can I ask you something? And I answer their questions. I share resources. I tell them about Marcus Ostrovsky and Dr. Zimmerman and the importance of documentation. I tell them they're not crazy, they're not paranoid, and they have the right to protect themselves even from their own children. This has become my purpose, the meaning I've extracted from betrayal. If Celestine's actions led to this, to me helping other people avoid or survive similar situations, then something good has emerged from the pain. Not enough good to justify the pain, but enough to make the pain less pointless. Last month, I received an unexpected letter. Not from Celestine, but about her. It was from a woman named Patricia Reardon, who introduced herself as Celestine's former therapist. The letter was carefully worded, probably legally vetted, and it said this: "Dear Mrs. Pritchard, I'm writing with Celestine's permission, though she does not know the specific contents of this letter. I treated Celestine for 2 years following the guardianship case. I'm no longer her therapist, as she chose to discontinue treatment after making what she felt was sufficient progress. I'm writing because I believe you deserve to know that Celestine did genuine work in therapy. She came to understand that her actions were driven by financial desperation, entitlement, and a fundamental lack of empathy for your position. She understands now that what she did was wrong, not just legally but morally. However, I'm also writing to tell you that I don't believe Celestine is capable of the kind of relationship you might hope for. She understands intellectually what she did wrong, but she struggles with genuine remorse. She's sorry it didn't work out the way she planned. She's sorry she faced consequences. I'm not certain she's sorry for the pain she caused you specifically. I'm violating no confidentiality in sharing this, as Celestine signed a release allowing me to contact you. I think she hoped I'd write something that might pave the way for reconciliation, but as your elder, as a woman myself, I felt you deserved honesty rather than false hope. You fought for your independence and won. You rebuilt your life. From what I understand, you've created something meaningful from the wreckage. Don't let guilt or hope or maternal instinct pull you back into a relationship that will only hurt you again. You owe Celestine nothing. Remember that. Respectfully, Dr. Patricia Reardon. I read that letter 5 times. Then I called Janet and read it to her over the phone. What are you going to do? Janet asked. Nothing, I said. There's nothing to do. Her therapist just gave me permission to feel what I've been feeling all along, that the daughter I raised is gone, if she ever existed, and the woman who tried to take my autonomy is who Celestine really is. That must hurt. It does, but it also clarifies things. I don't need to hope for reconciliation anymore. I don't need to wonder if I'm being too harsh or unforgiving. A professional who spent 2 years working with Celestine just told me that my instincts were correct. There's grief in that, but there's also relief. I'm writing this now, in late autumn, 4 years and 1 month after I found the guardianship papers on my door. The leaves are turning, the garden is preparing for winter, and I'm preparing for whatever comes next. I don't know how many more seasons I'll have. 71 is old, even if I'm healthy. The actuarial tables suggest I have another decade, maybe 15 years if I'm lucky. That's not much time, and I don't want to waste it carrying resentment. But I also won't waste it pretending the betrayal didn't happen, or welcoming back someone who's shown me exactly who she is. There's a difference between forgiveness and foolishness, between releasing resentment and accepting renewed harm. I've learned to live in the tension between these truths. I can acknowledge that Celestine is my daughter, while also acknowledging that she's not safe for me to have in my life. I can wish her well while maintaining absolute boundaries. I can carry both love and protection simultaneously. The house is quiet tonight. It's often quiet now, but quiet isn't the same as empty. The walls hold memories of Roland's laugh, of Celestine's childhood piano practice, of decades of ordinary living. The garden holds Theodore's roses and my own persistent hope that beautiful things can grow even in difficult soil. The rooms hold evidence of a life well lived, books I've read, projects I've completed, friendships I've nurtured. Tomorrow I'll wake up and water the plants and maybe drive to the nursing home to sit with Dorothy. I'll come home and make lunch and probably work in the garden if the weather holds. Janet might call, or I might call her. The evening will arrive with its long shadows, and I'll sit on my porch and watch the neighborhood settle into darkness. This is my life now. Not the life I imagined when I held my newborn daughter and dreamed of who she might become. Not the life I planned when Roland died, and I thought Celestine and I would grow closer, bonded by shared grief and resilient love. But it's my life, hard-won and honestly lived, built from the ruins of maternal expectation. And on the good days, when the light slants just right through my kitchen window and the garden blooms and I feel the deep satisfaction of autonomy preserved, I think, this is enough. This is more than enough. This is everything. The betrayal didn't destroy me. It changed me, carved out places inside me that will never fill back in the same way. But it also revealed reserves of strength I didn't know I possessed. It taught me that I could survive losing my daughter and still build a meaningful life. It showed me that family is what you create, not just what you're born into. I am 71 years old. My daughter tried to take my independence, my home, my right to exist on my own terms. She failed. I'm still here, still autonomous, still choosing my life every single day. Some victories are bitter, some survival is costly, but I'm still here. And I will be here, in this house, tending this garden, protecting this hard-won independence, until the day I'm not. And when that day comes, it will be on my terms, with my choices documented and my dignity intact. That's not the ending I wanted, but it's the ending I earned, fought for, and built from nothing but determination and the refusal to be erased. And in the quiet moments, in the garden at dawn, or on the porch at dusk, when I'm alone with my thoughts and my choices and my resilient, wounded heart, I think, I did it. I survived. I'm still here. That will have to be enough. And most days, it is.